You're now listening to the Laravel Podcast. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Laravel Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Matt Stauffer.
And I'm Taylor Otwell. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's great to be here, man. I love this. So this is part of that is because this is not our normal recording time. But last week you kind of put out a big, exciting video where you kind of shared about a 57 million investment in, Laravel together with, like a reminder about the announcement of cloud and everything like that. And you guys did do a Q&A session right afterwards. But some folks kind of felt like they wanted a longer Q&A session. They wanted some more questions answered. So I kind of put out a thing asking everybody, I was like, hey, if you got a few questions that weren't answered in the initial Q&A, kind of think about them over the weekend. It's been a couple days since, and a couple more questions have come in. So I want to ask you a few of those. But before we go there, I just kind of want to speak to everybody listening because there was so much consistency between one big chunk of the questions. And there were some questions that were technical details and, like stuff about the VS Code extension. We'll talk about those in a second. But a huge swath of the questions were around people's fears and anxieties. They said, I hear this news, I hear this update, and I'm afraid that X is going to happen. I'm anxious that that's going to happen, and it's going to do this to this wonderful thing I love, or it's going to do this to my career or to my, my work potential. And so, I asked Taylor for permission for this ahead of time. He said, yeah, like my goal for the first chunk of this is just to work through all the questions that basically revolve around people's anxieties around this announcement. So we can just say, hey, you're anxious about this. Let's ask Taylor the question that kind of gives us the clarity there. You're anxious about that? And so we're going to knock those out, and we have a couple other questions. But I do want to speak to everybody that like learning news like this, it can trigger, because Laravel has been very stable for 13 years. We were just talking about that, right? And so this is new, and new things can bring fears. They can bring unsureness. They can, and like the upside of Laravel, changing everybody's lives, also comes with the potential downside of if Laravel goes away, then all of a sudden, what change does that make to my life? So it's completely reasonable for us to have concerns and fears, and that's why I wanted to make sure we had space for those questions to kind of be surfaced here too. So I just wanted to kind of like just share with everybody ahead of time. A lot of these questions were very clearly, even though these words weren't said, like, I am afraid that X is going to happen. Can you tell me if that's going to happen or not? And so I wanted to kind of really throw those to Taylor, So you ready to go?
Yeah, I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right. So unsurprisingly, nobody's anxiety had anything to do with Laravel Cloud, right? Nobody was like, oh my God, Laravel Cloud is going to destroy my business or something. The anxieties were what either the investment into Laravel Cloud has to do with other things like Forge and Vapor, stuff like that, and self-deployment, or what the general investment into Laravel, like the organization and, Accel, means about the future of the framework or the future of the experience of being a developer. And so the first question that kind of like leads into that is, what motivated you taking investment, especially if like Laravel was already profitable in the first place? Like why choose to take investment and, the ups and downs that come with it versus just kind of staying where you were before?
Yeah, it's a great question. Ultimately it came down to, I felt like I had built everything I could build in a bootstrapped fashion for Laravel. Everything I had kind of dreamed of, I had tried to build. Forge being, my early stab at building something like a Laravel Cloud, although I didn't want to take on the risk of building a fully managed platform. I would have loved to build like Laravel Cloud back in 2014 as this fully managed, cloud infrastructure, but it was obviously way too much for one person. And so ultimately, I reached this fork in the road, like I've mentioned before, where it was like, I can either coast on what we've built so far and sort of, this is it. This is about as far as we can take Laravel with, pretty much. Or we could really swing for the fences and try to build some of these more ambitious projects that require a lot more help. They maybe have a bit more risk, but ultimately have much more reward, I think, for the Laravel ecosystem if we deliver on these products, which of course we all hope we do. So yeah, I've seen some people react to the news online with sort of this take of Taylor could have just built cloud anyway. And actually I probably couldn't have, Laravel is successful. Laravel is very profitable as I was running it, but building cloud is a huge undertaking, probably more than what people can imagine. It's a lot more moving parts to run your own infrastructure, to solve managed databases, to solve managed file storage, managed cache, managed queues, and then all of the other stuff that comes with running a cloud platform, GDPR, SOC 2, DMCA takedown notices, abuse of the platform. It's just a lot, and it is actually more than I could do on my own. In fact, so that's ultimately what led me to choose to work with Accel to scale up the team to a level where we could build awesome new products like cloud and more to come, and also continue to improve things like Laravel Forge, which we're not done with. But anyway, TLDR is that I wanted to do what I thought this community deserves, which is build an amazing platform for shipping Laravel apps. And I felt like the best way to do that would be to partner with Accel, which has a track record of building great companies that developers like in general.
Okay. And one of the follow-up questions for each of those in terms of what the motivation are is often asking, okay, well, is Taylor doing this really so that he can take this VC investment and then he can exit, right? Or is the VC investment coming because what they're trying to do is really kind of get this whole thing acquired by something else? So is this like Taylor sticking around for a little bit so that he can kind of go on his way out? Or is this like Taylor's, sticking around to stick around and he wants to keep doing this thing,
Yeah, I have no plans of leaving Laravel. I want to see this thing through. I want to continue to shepherd Laravel, to curate the framework, to get this cloud project platform launched, and then keep going past that. So yeah, it's not even on like my, I don't have like some calendar in my office where it says like, 2026 exit Laravel, it just not really how it is. It's still very much business as usual here, just with a bigger team, bigger ambitions, bigger goals, but no plans of calling it quits. Laravel is what I love to do. I think, it's been the most rewarding aspect of my like professional career is obviously building Laravel, and building this whole thing together with the community has been super rewarding. So I have no plans to stop doing that. As far as like, what is the goal as far as like, do we want to get acquired? What is the end goal? We really don't think that way. It's not something that even comes up in discussions. Really, the goal has been, let's build the most amazing company we can for Laravel and for PHP in general, you might say. And we don't really go beyond that, as far as like some further goal or some other motive we would have down the line. It's just about right now we're building the best platform we possibly can, the best framework we possibly can, and the best community we possibly can.
I love it. And
that's really what everyone has been focused on. Myself, what Accel, that's what we've been focused on.
Yeah. And that lines up really well with the next question I had for you, which was, what does Accel get from this? And a lot of people are saying, okay, great. Accel put $57 million in, and I know probably all of that wasn't Accel, but let's just kind of keep it there. What do they want back? And a lot of folks said, hey, I know VC, and if they put that much money in, they're expecting that money back in blood, a 10x or whatever. So, can you talk a little bit about what you know of what's Accel's goal here, and what are they trying to, what's the value that they get out of putting that money into Laravel?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, obviously, ultimately, all investment hopes for a return on an investment. So I think all venture capital investment would eventually hope for some sort of return. Again, it's not necessarily something that we discuss now, at least, or, probably in the near term. It's really the focus is all about making Laravel the best it can be, and let the chips fall where they do later on. But it's not like part of our, we don't go into Laravel board meetings and talk about, okay, how do we get the return? Like return. It's just not something that comes up right now. I think we're all just very locked in on making Laravel as awesome as possible. I think we're all very committed to staying true to what we've built so far. And that's something that Accel and I think are very aligned on. I'd say Accel sometimes is even more cautious about this than I am. They are very sensitive to respecting the open source community that Laravel has built thus far, because I mean, it's one of the main things that drew them to Laravel in the first place, was this passionate community of open source developers where you have people getting Laravel tattoos and, everything like that. And I think, Laravel has a history in open source, working with companies like Sentry, which is an open source, or the code is available on GitHub for the Sentry platform, basically. So, I think they get open source and they understand the value of community and walking that line between building awesome open source stuff, also trying to build a sustainable, profitable business around that, and balancing the two, which is, something we've been doing for a long time, honestly.
Yeah. And I hope you don't mind me jumping in a little bit, and we can kind of cut this if you don't want me to, but I have been really critical of VC and even Accel, because Accel showed up, long before you made this announcement, right? They've been kicking the tires of the Laravel community for over a year, and I've been really critical and really just kind of like, who are you and what are you trying to do with our precious community here? And one of the things that I've seen people kind of bring up recently is something I said earlier, which is sort of like, what do you want from us, right? Because it's like, you say Accel, sees the value of the open source community, and some folks heard that in the first one. They said, oh yeah, they see that they can kind of squeeze money out of us. And what's interesting to me that has been valuable to kind of like shift my perspective, at least from what I've seen so far, is that folks who see business value in open source software communities seldom see it with the open source consumer like developers as the primary target, but it's actually the companies that use open source software that are the folks who are actually like the place where there's like, hey, there's potential partnership here, because there's a whole huge world of developers that are building apps for companies that have budgets that are currently not being super well spent because the things aren't targeting them, because the vast majority of these platforms are targeting the .NET world or whatever these, I guess .NET might be open source now, but you know what I mean? Like this kind of like this traditional enterprisey world. And so it is possible to see open source as a place where like lots of new development is happening, lots of great growth is happening, and also for that not to be, hey, we see a whole bunch of developers that we're going to try and squeeze pennies out of. And again, I just got to be really transparent that like I didn't get that at first. And so I was like, yeah, you want our, you want all of our money as open source developers, and we're open source, we don't have any money. But like seeing that like they're trying to build something, at least based on what I've perceived so far, that gives the companies that we're building for this space to be able to say, oh, rather than having to DIY this kind of hosting solution, I can now get a first party official thing. And that's where there's kind of like opportunities for them.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the crazy thing is you might actually see, for the indie hacker that may be concerned about this, I think you will actually see it become more affordable to launch Laravel into production for that segment of users. But the thing we hear, when we go to places like Laracon, is there's a lot of companies out there that are hand rolling like Kubernetes environments, because they're a little bit bigger than what Forge might provide. Yeah. But there's really not a solution out there tailored for PHP and Laravel specifically of what they want to do. And they're very excited about cloud and actually very willing to like sign up and pay money to have someone else manage this, complicated infrastructure for them. So I think it's going to benefit everyone. And that's the goal. I think, kind of like I said in my Laracon talk, I wanted everyone to be able to ship their side projects, their indie projects out to Laravel Cloud. No brainer. And ultimately I think probably will end up saving money compared to what they've had in the past as far as options go for shipping Laravel applications, which I'm really excited about, because I think indie hacking and bootstrapping really goes back to the very beginning of Laravel and is really at the heart of a lot of what Laravel is about empowering like one person to build a web app and ship it. And I think that story is going to be easier than ever and probably more affordable than ever.
Good. I love to hear that. And I do want to take that to transition to talk about Forge and Vapor, but I shouldn't, because we're going to stick with the core stuff first. So I want to get through, we got 3 more, and then we're going to kind of get over to that stuff. So the next question we had around the Accel investment was, does Accel now own the Laravel framework?
Right. The Laravel framework is still open source MIT software that anyone can fork at any time, to be honest, and change and put out for themselves. So no, I don't think it would be correct to say that, Laravel or Accel owns an MIT licensed open source project. Right. The Laravel framework predates even Laravel as a company. You know what I mean? It's an open source project that I created and put out there on GitHub under the MIT license. So it really predates any business aspect to Laravel.
Okay. All right. The next one is, and the next two are about hosting. So how would you avoid, and I personally actually don't know the story, so I'm going to have to just repeat other people's words. But basically, how do you avoid the mess that a lot of folks feel like Vercel made of Next.js when it comes to the deploy story? And then now there's like Open Next, and there's just like, it feels like things didn't go the way people wanted there. Are you kind of like on top of what's going on there, and what does that story look like for you? And it might line up with the next question, which is just sort of like, is the self-deployment support for the Laravel world going to diminish over time because of cloud, or is it something that's going to stay supported?
Yeah. I wouldn't classify myself as a Vercel expert by any means, but I think what people are getting at, I guess I understand what they're getting at, and I think my answer to that would be that Laravel and PHP is very different than JavaScript, and it's got a much different history than JavaScript in the sense that Next.js, obviously kind of the most popular React framework, you might say, for building front-end apps. It is relatively new, I would say, and there's not as many established practices for deploying and managing Next.js apps when Vercel came on the scene, compared to PHP, which has been around for over 20 years. People have been deploying it in production at scale for just as long. Mm-hmm. And you cannot really pull the wool over PHP developers' eyes and say, oh, it's too complicated to deploy outside of our platform, because people have been deploying and scaling PHP apps for, like I said, over 20 years. So there's whereas I think with Vercel, they were, and in many ways are, sort of the only game in town for deploying Next.js apps. And if you want to use all of Next.js's sort of more advanced features, it's really easiest if you use Vercel. And, people can see that as a good thing or a bad thing, whatever. Mm-hmm. But it's a very different technology, and it's just a very different context than PHP. So as we've been building cloud, I can tell you with confidence that it has not come to mind to how can we make it so that you can only deploy Laravel on cloud? It's just, one, I don't think it's technically achievable. And two, it's just not something that has come up as a huge priority for us. We're just very focused on genuinely making Laravel Cloud as awesome as possible for Laravel apps, and the idea of trying to lock people into using cloud, it just hasn't come up, and I don't think it's doable. One, because we have Laravel Forge that we're still supporting, and that we still have plans for, actually. I mean, it all kind of ties together. There's a lot of things we would like to do on Laravel Forge leading into early next year. Really exciting stuff. And so we continue to be committed to that as well. And I think that's another difference between us and other companies is we don't feel like fully managed and self-managed needs to be sort of mutually exclusive. We'll be in the unique position, I think, among all sort of framework companies, you might say, of offering both a self-managed, bring your own cloud account deployment platform and a fully managed cloud platform. I'm not sure if that's ever really been offered by one single company, out of the gate. So, it's just different context, different technologies. And I think it's a little bit, it's just different. It's harder to make Laravel feature gated and locked in that way.
Yeah. And I mean, if I could tell you all right now, because one of the questions that was asked is what if you guys stop supporting Forge? I'm like, the number of competitors that would spring up and try to do exactly what Forge did if Forge ever came down. People have tried to do that when Forge already exists, let alone if Forge ever kind of lost support. The one thing about having an ecosystem of people who are always trying to make products that target that ecosystem is there's always going to be somebody ready to snap up that market share if Laravel officially lets it go.
Yeah, I mean, we're super excited about Forge, actually. The team is fired up. We have a whole team dedicated to Forge, and, that's where most of our revenue comes from. So we're very committed to, preserving that product and continuing to evolve the product. Because we use Forge every day. We see the pain points too. We see what we would like to improve. And so we have been, at work on that behind the scenes, I can tell you already.
Yeah, I love that. And that's a great transition to the next question, which is a lot of folks were saying hey, we heard a lot about Forge, but we didn't hear so much about Vapor when it kind of came to the future. Is Forge getting ongoing support, and maybe Vapor kind of we should start planning as Vapor users to move over to cloud, or is Vapor still getting support and development as well?
It's definitely still getting support. I think most of our focus is definitely on Forge Cloud and the other product we've been working on, to be revealed at Laracon Australia. We think Vapor is a great product. I really like Vapor a lot, actually. I think that in many ways we have explored Vapor to the extent we would like to. That's not to say that people should migrate necessarily or feel like there's an emergency, but I think that just most of our efforts are going into Forge and Cloud because it's where we feel like we have the most exciting ideas. But, again, we run stuff on production in Vapor. We have no plans to discontinue Vapor, to turn off Vapor, to force people to migrate off of Vapor. That's just not something that's on our roadmap.
No, and it's great hearing whenever you all are running something in production on any of these services, it's really kind of like a confidence boost in the future of the tool, right?
Yeah. And if you go to cloud.laravel.com, right now you're hitting a Vapor powered application. So
it's just turtles on turtles, right?
They're all just running Inception on each other all the way down. Yeah.
I love it. Okay, a couple more questions and I'm going to let you go for today. How easy will it be to migrate projects from Forge to Cloud?
Yeah, this is something we've thought about a lot. I think for larger customers, you might say our enterprise customers, I think we're very interested in kind of a hand-holding approach for some of those companies. For smaller installations, I think we would like to try to build as many automated systems as we can, either for, linking your Forge account to Cloud and sucking in all the info we can about your project so that we can try to make that as easy as possible. One kicker will be the database, right? Moving databases is never fun or easy, typically. Yeah. Of course, you could always back up and restore to a Cloud database. You could even connect to your Forge database from your Cloud application, potentially, if you wanted to leave it running where it is. So I think that's definitely going to be something for our documentation team and customer success team to sort of provide best in class materials on how to migrate your application, if that's what you want to do, right? It's not like you're going to be forced to move on day one or anything, or even in the long term. But, it'll just be something for us to document and kind of develop best practices around and help people out where we can.
And there'll probably be about 17 different YouTube videos within the first week about how to move over as well.
Yeah, I'm sure.
All right, one last Cloud question. Will Cloud support non-Laravel applications?
That's something that's definitely on our radar. I mean, of course, we would... the easiest thing to support after Laravel will be other PHP applications, things like Symfony, potentially things like WordPress, dare I say, but other popular PHP frameworks or CMSs or whatever, we would obviously be very interested in supporting. Statamic, of course, which is Laravel based, we're very interested in supporting. We do have sort of bigger ambitions with Laravel Cloud. I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but I think, deeper into next year, I'm sure we'll start exploring what else can we run on cloud. If people have a JavaScript microservice, they have a Go microservice, they have an Elixir app they would like to run on cloud. We would love to, I think, offer affordances so that you could run those things alongside your other Laravel apps. So, if you have a Nuxt.js frontend and a Laravel backend, I think we're very interested in figuring out how you can deploy both of those things to Laravel Cloud. Again, I don't want to get ahead of myself. That's not going to be there on day one when Laravel Cloud comes out. We're very focused on the core Laravel deployment story. Then I think you would see us move on to generic PHP and other tools and platforms and things. And then past that, I think you would see us start to explore, okay, how do we let people run other languages on Laravel Cloud, which is already something people do on Laravel Forge, right? People already sort of hack in or install Node apps on Laravel Forge. It happens all the time. So I think we'll explore that on Laravel Cloud as well.
I have one more for you, which is you talked about a VS Code extension that's going to make Laravel a lot easier. And some folks were asking, well, what about having an official one for PHP Storm? And then someone mentioned Sublime Text. And then I'm like, what about Coda, Vim, and NeoVim, VI, Emacs? So, what's the story? What led to VS Code being the primary one? And are there plans to do any more after that? Kind of what are you thinking there?
I think just our gut Our gut read of the pulse of the web dev community was that VS Code is very popular in other ecosystems, JavaScript in particular. We feel like it's very popular for new developers because it's free, and it kind of has a lot of mind share behind it in terms of extensions and all of that. So our thinking was start with VS Code, building a really great experience in that editor. I think we would love to explore other things. It's probably going to be through like an LSP, right? Like a language server provider. That basically, if you have something like that, you can bring this kind of functionality to basically all editors, right? In one go. It's just a little bit bigger of a technical lift than we could have or that we could tackle right now. So we're very interested in that. We hear that. It's on our radar. I can say that much. But we're starting with VS Code simply because we think that's where probably the biggest audience is for new developers.
Yeah. And I put out a tweet about this, but I wanted to kind of point out to folks that one of the stated goals long term, and especially lately for Laravel, is to make it as easy as possible for, I think you said, for PHP to be folks' first programming language again in a way it didn't used to be. And that kind of really kind of puts a lot of your goals and priorities and movements over the last year really kind of in perspective of like what if you take a brand new person who's coming out of boot camp or even going to boot camp or coming to college or whatever and say, I want to get started programming, what is the story to make development as easy for them as possible if they start in Laravel and start in PHP? And so I kind of am hearing that VS Code decision is one part of that whole puzzle for you. Is that right?
Yeah. Everything we're doing is part of one unified theory of everything, which is to make Laravel and PHP the go-to choice for building web apps. And everything sort of revolves around that, even from Laravel Cloud all the way back to the VS Code extension. It's all about, man, Laravel and PHP is an awesome way to be productive and ship apps. And we just if we can move a few pieces around the chessboard, we feel like we can kind of get back to where we want to be, which is being kind of the go-to choice that everyone from indie hackers to companies that want to build, a startup or their next big idea to choose from. So that's what we're working towards. We're just trying to get all the pieces in the right place.
Yeah.
Even though it may seem disconnected, like the VS Code extension, the Laravel Cloud, but it's all really part of one story, which is that.
Yeah. That makes sense, and it lines up with the changes you made to the file structure and the fact that SQLite is the first database out of the box. It's just like less steps to get started, more ease to get started. Herd is easier to install than Valet was, right? So Valet is. So less steps to get started. So love it. Okay, is there anything else? That's the end of my questions I had lined up for you. Having kind of spent the weekend after all your big announcements, is there anything else you wanted to kind of chat about or announce? Or are you feeling good for today?
Not really. We'll be shipping out some of the features I demoed at Laracon this week, the defer function, the concurrency stuff, the local temporary URLs. Nice. All of that stuff will probably ship out Wednesday. I documented it all over the weekend. Be on the lookout for that. But, go test out that stuff and let us know what you think.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to try it out. And for the rest of you all, thanks for hanging out with us. And we'll see you all next time.
See ya.